Welcome. Let me take you on a tour of one of my virtual worlds on Vrchat. It's called SUKU. So it seems that we've landed here on this tropical beach in this pod that presumably crashed into the ocean, washed ashore, and we've just climbed out and now we're in this world. So in this tour, I'm going to give you a little background information on some of the inspiration, some of the techniques that I've used in this world. And let's start with the pod. You can see some symbols on here, and they're not completely made up symbols. They are actually belonging to the Taino people. Taino is one of the bigger groups that were the native inhabitants of the Caribbean. And the Caribbean is of influence of this world because I actually live in Curacao, the neighboring island of Aruba, which is more well known. And this world kind of has a lot of influences from things that I see around me from day to day, but also the things that interest me. So there's not a big overarching story, but this is really more to be seen as a living painting that kind of projects the things that I've been interested in. The first thing you can see, the first landmark on this island, is this big sculpture, which is completely made up. But what I like about it, and this is something that you do see a lot on these islands, a lot of times you'll have sculptures on the coastline looking out into the sea. And usually they function some way as a protector of the people out on the boats. In this world, I don't give any context to anything because, as I said, as a living painting, I think it should just be experienced and enjoyed without too much previous knowledge, so you can project whatever stories you see in them. That did raise some questions on one of the tours that I did concerning this little house we see here in the distance. So this house is called the Kanuko house, and you see them a lot on Curacao. They used to be used for housing slaves. There were a lot of slaves on Curacao, and at some point, when the Dutch colonialists arrived on the island, they made it the number one economy, sadly. There were also plantations on Curacao where slaves worked, and they would live in these small little houses that were very simple, but also very effective in multiple ways. First of all, they were very dark, so they were really meant to keep the sunlight out, which you want on an island like Curacao where it's very hot. But also these two doors, the front and back door, were oriented towards the kind of continuous wind you have on Curacao that always kind of comes from the same angle, functioning a little bit as a natural air conditioning. You can see I built something here in a little menu in VRChat, which makes it easy for you to find your friends if they are visiting the world. If you're familiar with VRChat, you've seen that a lot. The angle in the walls are basically just to be able to make a stronger house, giving the sometimes heavy winds you can have on Curacao. These walls would usually be filled up, sometimes with rubble, sometimes with coral, which you can find a lot here in Curacao. Now, as you can see, I didn't make the island completely tropical. There are various types of trees and plants, because again, I'm not trying to make a little slice of the Caribbean or Curacao here. I'm making this potpourri of styles and influences that I find interesting, or at least found interesting when I made this world, which was about 2 years ago. It won Best Art World in the Raindance Immersive competition, which is a great community of VR lovers and creators. So now the second architectural structure we see here is showing a floating structure that has some of the more traditional Curacao or Caribbean houses, specific windows. Some of them also have a connection to the Dutch colonial style, which had some architectural influences on Curacao as well. Here I turn it into a fantasy house that rotates and floats. If you walk a little closer, you can hear some music I made for it, which is kind of a waltz, which obviously I think we all, since Kubrick, associate with floating, rotating objects. Maybe that's just me. I'd say one of the big influences on this world, at least visually, is Studio Ghibli, the anime studio, that has a nice blend of fantasy and sometimes even going into the psychedelic. But you'll see some more of that later in this world. There we can see the capsule in the distance. So I've strayed from the path, but here it is. A walk through the forest. With this world, I really wanted to experiment a bit with a bigger world, full-scale landscape, and it will take you about an hour or maybe a little more to actually see it all. I've made worlds like that before that are really big, and obviously when you want to visit them in VR, you can only visit them through PC VR, so you can't watch them on a mobile headset. So here we come to a part where I've clearly made it so you're not supposed to go in. This was kind of a little joke. Every time I gave a tour here, I'd be very serious and I tell the group that they were not allowed to enter here. And they would usually laugh a little bit because obviously in a virtual world that doesn't mean anything. People have complete freedom to go where they want. But I'd be very serious and tell them like we're not supposed to go here. Then after the tour, people could freely explore the world. Most of them would immediately be the first ones to check out what was there. And actually there's really nothing there. There's a small little building that I'm not even going to show you because I don't think it's that interesting. Just going to be following the main path, because obviously this was kind of constructed to give you certain sight lines. For example, here you can see this house kind of appearing in the distance, kind of pulling you forward, wanting to discover what's going on there. So this is an example of the kind of architecture you would find on Curacao, influenced by Dutch architecture, as I've explained before, but the colors are very Caribbean. So in the Netherlands you will not find these houses completely blue or pink or lime green. You will in Curacao. Now there are multiple ways to enter this building, but I'd suggest you just use the front door, because then you get some of the music. was kind of an art installation inside this house. No real story behind it, but these kind of worlds for me are really dreams, and I try to come up with the concepts and the ideas in the same way where I just start building this world, and I start with the landscape. I don't make a path, I just make the landscape the way I want it to be. I start walking through it and start to imagine what I could see where. So it is very intuitively built in that sense. So here's another, here's a gate. We are going to enter. And this was also inspired by Studio Ghibli vibes. Spirited Away was the movie that kind of inspired this wall, although I did give it a little bit of a, as I said, Dutch colonial architecture vibe with that top. But in that movie there's also this gate with a sculpture in front of it. Then you walk through. Now this is kind of the big moment. So this is usually a little bit the climax when I do a tour in this world. Everybody has to go to the same gate, so the experience is kind of directed in that sense, and people hear the music, all custom by the way, at the same time. I'd say some of these shapes were also a bit inspired by Nausicaa, Valley of the Wind, also a Ghibli film. Although not a lot of people really see it that way, I think in the end it does end up being very much kind of my own style. Put a little spaceship here. Somebody left a radio and stuff. There's a little Russian radio you can hear. Why? Again, this is all kind of intuitively the kind of world building that kind of just makes you wonder, like, what's going on here? Where is this person? Am I going to see this person walking through? I really love stuff like that. It always reminds me when I played the game Firewatch, which was a really popular game where you're kind of exploring this forest, and you'll find a tree very early on in that game which has big markings from a bear's claw, and obviously you're always wondering if the bear is actually in the game, if you're going to meet the bear. Spoiler alert, you never do, which for some people it's a disappointment. For me, I love that because it's really just a nice way to enhance the performance, and a lot of times I don't really care, there's not that kind of payoff. So here we're kind of going through this otherworldly little lake. There's another building which has some of the Aino symbols on it. This was the phase actually 2 years ago when I started dabbling a little bit in AI, using Midjourney to come up with some concept art, but still fully hand modeled and hand textured. Which is true for all the models you see except for some of the foliage. Some of the trees were actually existing assets that I modified a little bit. transitional audio together. So I'll go a little closer, and then you can hear the different sounds actually coming from the location where they are being played. Some weird little one-eyed creatures standing around. Alright, let's continue. When I started building virtual worlds, it was really because I was building a bunch of 3D models in VR, which I really loved doing, but then I really had nothing that I could really do with those 3D models. So the first world that I built, which is called Maranga, which you can also find on VR Chat, just started as that, as a world for me just to put some 3D models in there. And again, there was not very little context, there was not a big overarching story. It was more like somebody described it, kind of taking a peek at my creative brain and see where my interests and inspirations were at the time. I think you can look at most of my virtual worlds like that. Alright, so as we continue on the path, you can actually see the Raindance Award in the distance, which I placed here because I felt it kind of paired nicely with the more angular style of this kind of weird otherworldly architecture. So this style I really used a lot in the first world that I built, again Maranga. It's kind of a low poly style, pretty angular, not too smooth, and it's very good for optimization, especially in the early days of VR. Equipment was not very capable, and you'd had to be really mindful on how lightweight your models were. For SUKU, I tried to kind of change that and push it more, because we are years later now and machines are much more capable, and because I'd already decided to make it specifically for PC VR, I wanted to use a higher visual fidelity. Now, there are not a lot of other tricks that I used, just try to be as optimized as you can with the 3D models and bake as many textures into one. Use light baking, although in this case the directional sun is real time. But if it's just one directional light, it's usually still okay for PC VR. I wanted it to be real-time light because you can actually see some of the leaves animated, the shadows, when you see them on the ground. And there are some other flying objects that cast their shadows. So here we're walking up into the forest. And I've had some complaints in the past that for my worlds you sometimes have to walk quite a bit. I don't really care that much. I think it's kind of sometimes important that you have to pace yourself. You can have to take a little time before there's like a visual payoff. So here's a really big sculpture of a I'd say a bird creature that is holding a cup of sorts, and I have made it possible, although it is very hard to do, to climb up on here. I'm not going to jump in because last time I did that I wasn't able to come out. That's really all that is to see there. I'm going to go back and take the final route to show you kind of the ending of of the tours. There is some more stuff to see. Obviously the world is bigger, you can explore more, but I really just wanted to show the highlights of this one. Here you can see the effect of that real world sunlight showing those animated leaves on the ground. The modeling I do, it's all done in Gravitysketch, which is VR software. And I think for me it's really important that I'm able to make my 3D models in VR. Especially if they're going to end up in VR, then I wouldn't even know really how to do it anymore in traditional 3D software. VR has really changed how I model, what I model, and how fast I can model. It is such a game changer. It's hard for me to understand why not everybody has switched to VR when it comes to 3D modeling. Oh, we got a little flickering going on there. Don't know what happened there. I haven't really seen that before. Because trust me, this world is pretty optimized. So yes, Gravitysketch for the modeling, and Substance Painter for materials. I will use 3ds Max for some post-processing. Maybe I need to make some textures or add some textures. Do some technical stuff there, flip some normals, the usual. But the building and of all these assets and the fun is really had in Gravitysketch. The types of organic shapes that you see in this world, they're also much easier to do in VR because you're actually looking at a 3D model in 3D. Sometimes I go back into 3D Max and try to model something, and it's hard. I kind of give up because I'm just getting impatient because I'm now used to the speed which I can work in VR. So this world is called SUKU. I think I mentioned that before. SUKU is Papiamento, the native language of Curaçao, and SUKU means sugar. So just a meaning, something sweet, something nice to look at. So here are a little bit of, I call these some sugar cubes. Along the way to what is going to be a little colorful restaurant, which I think really shows the type of modeling that you can do in VR, and in VR specifically. What you'll see in a little bit. So the restaurant itself is also called SUKU. There you can see it in the distance. What I really like about VR is you can really play with these lines of sight. So you can really determine that, in this case, you can see the name from a distance and have some direction, have that pull you forward, wanting to explore what is going to be there. So here again, built in that fairly low poly faceted style that I used. that I started my VR journey in, but also very organic at the same time. So no symmetry, every piece is hand placed, and it gives this handmade feel, I think, to these types of models. Those imperfections, all that extra information does somehow get into the 3D model. We have these two musicians to welcome us. Music is very important in Curacao, and we're lucky to still have a lot of live music playing all through the week. So here we are. And as I said, this kind of architecture, it's very spacious, really kind of goes all over the place with no straight lines and everything kind of moving and dancing around. Also having these things, for example, just floating, not being attached. I really like to do that stuff because why wouldn't you? You have these possibilities in the virtual space. I'm always a bit annoyed when people try to recreate actual buildings in VR because why would you? For example, people organizing some symposium in VR, they'll actually build a symposium hall to do that. To me, that is so boring. You know, why not have a meeting in a little sauna area? A little pool. So this guy's playing some tunes. Again, all custom music. I make a lot of music, and these VR worlds are a great place for me just to put all my art together. Otherwise, a lot of this stuff would just live on my computer and nobody would ever see or hear it. These are actually some 3D models I made much longer ago, which were actually NFTs. This one was part of a box from Pranksy. I don't know if you know anything about the NFT space, but he's fairly well known. And I had the pleasure to work with him. I also worked with some other really great people in that space at that time. Alright, so let's go a little bit further. Whoops, we have a little occlusion problem here. Yes, I probably didn't test this thoroughly enough. So here we're kind of back in the aquatic underwater theme, and I think these worlds are kind of also 50% museum wherever you look, and that's just so it gives me the freedom to basically do whatever I want. And as I said, kind of really based on intuition and feeling, imagining the things that I think I just want to see or be put together. We'll end it here with this little vista, which was also kind of the route that I used to take giving those tours. I might pick it back up again, but I thought in the meantime I would do this YouTube video so more people could enjoy this and hear me talk about some of the background stuff that I used. Obviously this was built in Unity using the Vrchat SDK, as I said, modeled in Gravitysketch, materials with Substance Painter. Some of the 3D models are actually sculpted, so the second fish you can see there was actually sculpted, so that was not done in Gravitysketch. I think this one was done in Adobe Medium, which is sculpting software. And then these simple animations, I'm not an animator, but I can do some really simple stuff, were done in VS Max. So yes, this was SUKU. I hope you enjoyed it, and I hope you visit. You need to download Gravitysketch, but, and this is important, you don't necessarily need VR. You need a fairly good computer, and you can actually enter this world in desktop mode, so you can explore it by yourself or with others. And I want to thank you so much for watching.